All right, this is our next set of notes over taxonomy. Um, so this should cover the next few questions on your note sheet, and we will go through some activities and some practice in class as well. So here we go. Taxonomy is the science of naming and classifying organisms. So if you've ever heard of like humans are called Homo sapien, that is their taxonomy. That includes their genus and their species. There is a lot more that goes into taxonomy, which includes the domain, the kingdom, the phylum, the class, the order, the family, the genus, and the species. And all of that put together helps classify the organism that's in question. Binomial nomenclature, that's the formal two parts. So again, Homo sapien, Homo coming from the genus, and then sapien is the species. And that is the universally accepted name. So if you go to a different country and you say human, they might not know what that is. But if you tell a scientist from another country Homo sapien, they would know and understand what you're talking about because it uses typically a common Latin root or a common Latin language. So again, with our binomial, bi means two, nomial means name, so it literally translates to two names. When we do binomial nomenclature, we use the genus and the species. So the genus is going to be the group that is basically closely related, and then the species is the population that is they can like interbreed within each other. So an example of this would be like bluebirds. So the genus for this would be the bluebird, and then the species would be the eastern, the western, the mountain. So they're all bluebirds. They're all the same genus, but the species would be more about, in this case, their location. So there are some rules to binomial nomenclature. Very first thing is that the genus goes first, and then the species comes second. The name is italicized or underlined. So when you write Homo sapien, if you can't italicize it, you can write it Homo and then sapien, and then you underline it. So that just kind of pinpoints that you are talking about the kind of formal name for that organism. The first letter of the genus name is capitalized, and there should be a little line up here to indicate that the species name is lowercase. So you can do the same thing in like Canis lupus, which is wolves. So if you have Canis, which means dog, and then lupus, which means moon, it literally translates to moon dog, which makes sense because wolves howl at the moon. And then the final rule is that the species name is never used alone. So if you saw something where it just said lupus, that doesn't mean anything. You need to have the genus and the species in order to specify the organism that's in question. And we'll do those what's wrong with these when we come into class. So organisms can be defined by their name, by their formal binomial name, or by their taxonomy. How we get to figuring out which particular organism or which species we're talking about is we can use what's called a dichotomous key. And what a dichotomous key is it's you go through a series of steps, and it's kind of like if you've ever read a pick your own ending book where you kind of if you're reading like a thriller book and it says like you want the main character to live, go to page blah blah blah. If you want the main character to see the scary person, go to page 102. So you choose kind of your steps. The same thing happens with the dichotomous key. So it's paired statements. And if that statement is true about your organism, it will tell you which step to go to next. So we will do this leaf dichotomous key in class, and then you guys will do the shark key, dichotomous key. You will do that as an activity to be done in class next time. So what is the goal of doing all of this? So kind of the big goal is that we want to be able to organize living things into groups, and we want these groups to have meaning for biologists and even those who are not well versed in biology. But these groups are known as taxa. So we want to be able to kind of put them into these 8 main taxa to classify what specific organism we're talking about. So the 8 taxa that we categorize all living things into is the domain, which includes basically what type of cell does it have? Is it prokaryotic or is it eukaryotic? Then you have the kingdom. A couple of examples of the kingdom would be like the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, the fungi kingdom. And then you have the phylum, which, if we follow kind of the animal kingdom, so animal kingdom or animals would be under the domain eukaryotic. They are the animal kingdom. Phylum would be, are they vertebrates? Do they have a backbone or do they not have a vertebrate or vertebrae? And then it continues into class, order, family, genus, species. And there's a few, I can't really see it right here. There we go. There's a few mnemonic devices you can use to remember the 8 taxa. One of them is Dutch kings, so Dutch for domain, kings for kingdom, phylum for play, chess on fine glass surfaces. So Dutch kings play chess on fine glass surfaces. Another one I've heard is Dear King Philip came over from Germany. So I don't know why, but that's one that I learned. And then we'll do a couple more in class. And on your notes, it does ask you to come up with your own mnemonic device. So using the first line of, or the first letter, excuse me, of each of the taxa. Sorry, trying to get that out of the way. There we go. Come up with a sentence or a saying or some way to remember the order of the 8 taxa. You are going to need to know the order of those. So make sure you spend some time and do something like, even if it doesn't make sense to anybody else, as long as it has some relevance and it makes sense to you, then that's really what you're going for. You want this to be helpful for you. So here is just those 8 taxa, kind of looking at that. So if we start, this one we're going to start from the bottom with the domain eukarya. So again, these are all eukaryotic cells. They have a nucleus. And then we can take of this eukaryotic domain, in here we also have like plants. So when we go to the animal kingdom, we get rid of the plants. So I'm going to clear my screen so we can get rid of the plants. So then we go to the animal kingdom. So everything left here is going to be an animal. Then we go into the phylum, which is the chordata, aka vertebrates or invertebrates. So in this case, we got rid of all of the invertebrates. So we can get rid of the insect. I think that's it. And then after that, we go into the mammalia class or the mammals. So we get rid of the non-mammals. Then we go into the carnivora or carnivorous class, the carnivora order. These are all animals that eat meat, so we can get rid of the herbivore. Then we go into the canidae, which is going to be kind of like a dog of sorts. So in this case, we can get rid of the cat. And then what's remaining, they're not dogs because that's the family, is the dog family. But these are going to be animals that they more closely represent dogs. They all came from a common ancestor. So then we go into the Canis genus, which is the dog. And then we go into the species, which is Canis lupus. So lupus would be like the species. So that gets rid of the jackal because the jackal is not part of that. And then we can go even a step further into the subspecies, because we talked about this a couple classes ago, where dogs were an off branch of wolf. So in our subspecies, we are looking at Canis lupus, familiaris, which is family. So we're looking at the dog that is in the family. So that gets rid of the wolf. So that's where we're at. So we have Canis, which is the genus, Lupus, which is the species, and then familiaris, which is the subspecies. So here that is again, just as a bigger picture, a little easier to see. Some more examples would be doing like humans. So the domain, again, eukaryotic, Animalia, which is the animal, chordata, which means we have a backbone. We are part of the mammal or the Mammalia family. And then once we get to the order, we get into the primate order. So our common ancestors was similar or was the same for all primates. So that includes us and gorillas and orangutans and all of like spider monkeys and things like that. We all have a common ancestor many millions of years ago. And then we go into the hominid family, which this is going to be primates that walk upright. The genus is into Homo. This means we have started to lose a lot of our like body hair. And then current species right now is sapien. So we are right now. Modern humans are the only living organism in the genus Homo, which again means that we are primates who walk upright with little body hair. So what are some problems with traditional classification? And that just means like humans. But in traditional classification, uh, the idea behind it was just using simple similarities and differences. And with traditional classification, it wasn't always in the same language. So you or a scientist from like the United States who maybe their primary language was English is talking to a scientist from let's say Mexico whose primary language was Spanish, and they could be talking about the same organism and not know it. So as we use modern classification, we do this using evolutionary ideas and evolutionary evidence and relationships that we have. So kind of going back and saying, okay, what were our common ancestors? How did this organism evolve from this other organism that happened millions of years ago? And the other thing with modern relationships is it uses that universal language so that biologists all over the world, does not matter which country you're in, they will be talking about the same organism and they'll know they're talking about the same organism. It takes out like the guesswork or like middlemen. But that is it. So those are our notes over taxonomy. As always, we will go over some of the activities and some practice questions in class. But if you have questions until then, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you then.